13 cities, over 1,000 villages, more than 1 million people forced to leave everything behind, all so one nation could build the single largest dam in human history. In central China stands a wall of concrete tall enough to flood entire countries behind it, and it took 100 years, one revolution, and the displacement of over 1 million people just to build it. Welcome back to Echo Mind Documentaries. If this is your first time here, subscribe, like, share, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Let's dive back into the topic. In the heart of central China, where the Yangtze River cuts through ancient gorges, stands a wall of concrete so massive it can be seen from orbit. It rises 185 meters into the sky, roughly the height of a 60-story building, and stretches more than 2 kilometers from bank to bank. Behind it sits a reservoir holding nearly 40 billion cubic meters of water, enough to drown entire countries. This is the Three Gorges Dam, the largest dam ever built by human hands, and its story is one of ambition, sacrifice, and the price a civilization was willing to pay for power. The dream began more than a century ago. In 1919, a young revolutionary named Sun Yat looked at the wild, flood-prone waters of the Yangtze and imagined something audacious, a structure that could tame the river and turn its fury into electricity for a nation still finding its footing. For decades, the idea remained just that, a sketch on paper, while war, revolution, and poverty consumed China's attention. Mao Zedong revived the vision in the 1950s, but his engineers warned that the technology, the funding, and the political stability required simply did not exist yet. The river kept flooding, towns kept drowning, and the dream kept resurfacing generation after generation, refusing to die. It was not until 1992 that the Chinese government finally approved the project, and even then, it passed the National People's Congress with an unusual amount of open dissent, nearly a third of delegates voting against or abstaining, an almost unheard-of crack in the unity of China's political system. The scale of what was being proposed was simply too large to ignore quietly. Over 1 million people would need to leave their homes. Whole cities would vanish beneath rising water. Temples, burial grounds, and archaeological sites stretching back thousands of years would be lost forever. But the promise of flood control, energy independence, and national pride ultimately won the argument. Construction began in December 1994 in a small town of Sandoping, deep within the gorges that gave the project its name. For the next 12 years, tens of thousands of workers poured concrete around the clock in nearly every season, eventually using more than 27 million cubic meters of material, enough to build a structure heavier than almost anything else humanity had ever attempted. Steel reinforcement alone, laid end to end, could have wrapped around the Earth several times. The Yangtze, the third longest river on the planet, was diverted, channeled, and finally caged behind a wall engineered to outlast empires. By 2006, the main structure stood complete, but the project's true power was only beginning to come online. One by one, 32 massive turbines were installed, each capable of generating 700 megawatts on its own. When the final generator switched on in 2012, the Three Gorges Dam became the most powerful power station of any kind on Earth, surpassing every nuclear plant, every coal plant, and every other dam ever constructed. Today, it produces more electricity in a single year than entire countries consume, enough to light cities from Shanghai to the heart of central China, flowing through transmission lines that stretch for thousands of kilometers across the country. Raw power, though, was never the only goal. The dam was built to solve a problem that had haunted the Yangtze Basin for 2,000 years: catastrophic flooding. Before its construction, the river broke its banks roughly once every decade, killing hundreds of thousands of people across centuries of recorded history. The reservoir behind the dam can now hold more than 22 billion cubic meters of floodwater, cutting the surge downstream by tens of thousands of cubic meters per second during the worst monsoon seasons. For farmers and fishermen along the river's lower reaches, that flood control has, by official accounts, prevented disasters on a scale almost too large to comprehend. And yet, the dam did not rise without cost. The reservoir it created stretches more than 600 kilometers upstream, swallowing 13 cities, over 100 towns, and more than 1,000 villages beneath its surface. More than 1.3 million people, likely far more in reality, were relocated, many to unfamiliar provinces, leaving behind homes their families had occupied for generations. Entire local histories were erased almost overnight. Archaeological sites that had survived dynasties, wars, and revolutions were submerged before they could be fully studied, their secrets lost to silt and depth. The gorges themselves, celebrated for centuries by poets and painters for their dramatic, narrow beauty, were forever altered, their cliffs now rising from a flat, artificial lake rather than a wild and churning river. The ecological toll has been just as severe. The Yangtze once was home to extraordinary creatures found nowhere else on Earth, including the Chinese paddlefish and the baiji, a freshwater dolphin that had swum these waters for roughly 20 million years before vanishing into what scientists now call functional extinction. The dam disrupted the natural flow of sediment the river had carried for millennia, a slow but steady reshaping of the riverbed both upstream and downstream that continues today.
Geologists have also linked the immense weight of the reservoir to a measurable rise in landslides and minor seismic activity in the surrounding mountains, the sheer mass of the water pressing down on fault lines that had remained stable for centuries. The dam's influence extends in directions few people would expect. Scientists have calculated that shifting such an enormous volume of water away from the oceans and into a single reservoir on land actually altered the distribution of mass across the planet, slightly changing Earth's moment of inertia and lengthening the day by a fraction of a microsecond. It is a number far too small for any human being to feel, yet large enough for satellites to measure. A strange and quiet testament to just how massive this single structure truly is. Beyond the dam wall itself, an entire second feat of engineering was built simply to let ships pass. A 5-stage ship lock allows vessels to climb the equivalent height of a 40-story building, lifted in stages through chambers filled and drained like a series of giant bathtubs. For larger vessels, engineers built the largest ship lift on Earth, a vertical elevator capable of hoisting boats weighing up to 3,000 tons straight up and over the dam in a single dramatic motion, a piece of machinery almost as remarkable as the dam it serves. More than 30 years after construction began, the debate over whether the Three Gorges Dam was worth its cost has never fully settled. Supporters point to the floods it has prevented, the carbon emissions it has avoided by replacing coal power, and the economic transformation it brought to one of China's poorest regions. Critics point to the cultural heritage drowned beneath its reservoir, the communities scattered and never made whole, and the slow, accumulating environmental debt that scientists say may not be fully understood for generations. Both arguments are likely true at once. Perhaps that is the nature of monuments built at this scale. They are never simply good or simply bad. They are mirrors, reflecting back whatever a civilization values most in the moment it decides to build them. What is certain is the scale of the ambition itself. Sun Yat first imagined this dam before airplanes regularly crossed oceans, before humanity understood the structure of the atom, before most of the technology eventually used to build it had even been invented. It took 100 years for that idea to become concrete, steel, and water. The Three Gorges Dam stands today not just as the largest dam ever built, but as proof of how far a nation will go, how much it will move, flood, and forever change in pursuit of controlling one of the most powerful forces nature has ever produced.